Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Fire Up Florida. Boy, it's fired up outside. We got a lot of lightning out there and a light show that you don't want to be a part of, but I'm hoping that everybody will go out there and be a part of this show. Well, my normal crew, Rod Peterson, welcome to the big show, or back to the big show.
Nice to see you guys. Hi,
Good to
Scott. Hi,
see,
George.
good to see you.
Hello.
Good to see you and Serena on Friday night as well. We talked about some of the big plans, and those will come. We'll talk about them more and more as time goes on. And yes, George Eichhorn, we both get to tonight.
From a far different weather outlook, just nice and beautiful day here in Detroit.
Well, we got a lot to talk about. We're gonna, as this show is titled, "Betting Experts High in the Florida Panthers." You won't want to miss that. We'll talk about a couple old-time hockey players. Rod will give us an update on the Lightning and a couple major signings today in the National Hockey League. With that said, okay, in July, DraftKings listed the Panthers and Dallas Stars as co-favorites to win the Stanley Cup in 2025 at plus 900, followed by the Edmonton Oilers plus 950 and the New York Rangers, Colorado Avalanche plus 1200. However, dealing with the loss of Philip Broberg and Dylan Holloway, plus dealing with veteran defenseman Cody Cece, the Edmonton Oilers will take a tumble. So, Rod, you wrote it. Why don't you go into more details about what you put together there?
Well, it's just the sports books are a lot of fun to look at. Just as a guideline as to what the odds makers are thinking. If you remember last year going into the Stanley Cup playoffs, or actually a month before, all the sports books had Dallas, Carolina to meet in the Stanley Cup final. It wasn't even close. So, and that was a month away from the start of the Stanley Cup playoffs. So here we are a month away from the start of the regular season. That's your top five, and those are your pair. I think it's a good guideline when you say George and Scott that people think Edmonton and Florida are going to be very good. It's the
Yeah.
usual suspects. The New York Rangers, as a matter of fact, I've got picked to win the Metropolitan Division. I think we would all agree with that. I put that in the column, Scott. 10 NHL things which you publish in your fine publication every week, just to give people an idea who the front runners are going into the season. But as we know, anything can happen.
All I can tell you is that's a brilliant move, especially when you talk about, you know, first or second week of September and earlier. People don't know enough about trade deadlines and transactions. So therefore, when I have a guy like you out there putting that out there, it adds a degree of intrigue. So anything you can do to talk about sportsbook, I'm totally okay with it. And by the way, we're going to have another one leading after this one. But I agree. I think it's certainly a way to gauge it, and we'll find out as time goes on. Bear in mind, the only difference with the Panthers this year is instead of go hunt, they're going to be hunted. And we'll find out how some of the other things play out. All right, I'll turn it over to you, George.
Well, listen, it's typical of sports prognosticators. Usually they lean back and to see, who were the top teams when things ended in June. And it's no surprise to me that the teams that you mentioned, Rod, are at the top of the list. But like Scott mentioned, there's so much movement. There's free agency, there's player moves, there's trades, there's waivers. There is so much movement in pro sports today, including the NHL, that even though you think you have a clue as to who might win or who might make the finals, it's so difficult to predict. And Edmonton's a great case. Florida's a great case. There's player movement going on. The Red Wings are another example. They couldn't sign four or five guys. So what do? Eisenman goes and gets a bunch of four or five new guys. I mean, and this happens throughout the league. But logic tells you normally that you look at who finished the strongest last season. Of course, we know the Panthers are going to have a target on their back. That's a given. Yeah, I mean, really is, like Scott said. I mean, you're the wanted now. You're the wanted. You're the animal that everybody wants to catch and for I don't mean this to kill, but anyways, it is tough to do. It is tough to do, but that's kind of what I do myself too. You go back and you look at the teams with the biggest strength and the margin of victory and all kinds of other categories you want to look at, goals for, goals against, goalies average, and you try to give your best guesstimate. And does it always happen? Of course not. Of course not. Like you said, Rod, most people had Carolina last year. and a lot of people had thought things were coming off. Well, that didn't happen. But all I'm saying is that I would guess that those teams that you mentioned, the 4 or 5 that are out there, including Dallas, including the Rangers, Edmonton, and of course the Panthers, and don't forget Boston's usually good. You got teams up there that are always going to be the wanted.
Good points, both of you. All right, we'll stay on the sportsbook theme because as it stands now, the Edmonton Oilers and Florida Panthers remain the most likely Stanley Cup final matchup in 2025, according to sportsbooks, which Rod just alluded to. Edmonton already boasts two of the top 4 players in Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid, and now own 2 of the 4 highest paid as well, Rod. So now do they have top players, but they're paying a lot of money as well.
Yeah, well, we talked about this a little bit last week. How the general managers are trying to find a way to stay on top, be competitive, and keep your star players, knowing that the salary cap's going up incrementally, but the salaries are going up exponentially. Right? And right now, Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl for next season will be the highest paid in the National Hockey League. And I don't mean to get out of order or scoop the host, but with Sidney Crosby today signing an extension of 2 years, $8.7 million per year,
Right.
guys, I didn't think for a second he was ever going to go anywhere else. It looks like he's very happy there. He's won 3 Stanley Cups. I wonder how much he could have gone on the open market, gotten if he'd gone to free agency. Obviously, he had no interest in doing that. But it kind of begs the question of the Pittsburgh Penguins a playoff team or not with Sid. When they come through Sunrise, and I don't know if you watched them in Detroit when they were there, George, recently, but when he's come through Sunrise, he is the hardest working best player on the Pittsburgh Penguins roster, Sidney Crosby. I know that's a completely different answer to what your question was, but we just said the Oilers have 2 of the top 4 highest paid players in the league. I call it budget Tetris, salary Tetris. Somebody's going to feel the squeeze at the other end, of the line. You can't pay for those complimentary pieces. So the Oilers think with the top end talent, that's what will get them there. NFL teams do the same. They give all the money to the quarterback, and they bring in cheap young rookies. Hockey teams are trying to do the same thing.
That's a good model to copy, obviously, and the NFL seems to have perfected it well. And I think one of the things you can say about that is, in some of the cases where you have younger players, you're locking up for long terms what you're doing to keep that bottom line. They get the security of that money for that period of time, take a little bit less, and they know. And hockey players, I'll just say this, Rod, are some of the most unselfish players I have ever seen. They really, really are. Period. I mean, they are very, very unselfish. So more power to them. We're going to talk about Crosby in a moment, and then we'll talk about another guy that earned it, and we'll continue to roll as we're already doing. But no, I have no problem with that. And I don't know about the Edmonton Oilers. Okay, I'm not sure what they have up there. All I do know is they have a new general manager, and Stan Bowen is what they have, taking over for Ken Holland. And we know they have Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, as you just mentioned. So more power to them. And I think it'd be interesting to see Edmonton and Florida. I don't know yet. It depends on how tough the West is and what they do. But again, we're talking before the regular season. It's just why there is so much intrigue when you talk about sports books, DraftKings, and so forth.
Yeah, well, it'd be a hell of a story if they did meet in the Stanley Cup final again. We've talked about it on this program. Game 7 last year was the second most viewed ever. So I don't think the NHL would hate a Florida Edmonton Stanley Cup final. That's just my thoughts.
Well, your thoughts are it's a North American matchup, is what it is. That's why the NHL would hate it. We've said our thing, but Mr. Eichhorn will say his.
Yeah, well, it's no surprise to me that, like you mentioned, Edmonton's got these 2 high players. They're both very talented. They're very much deserving of it. Come on, I'm coming from a city where we just roll in the money in the old days under Mike Ilitch and the Red Wings Stanley Cup championship years. Of course, the salaries were much lower than they are now. But the thing is what you're trying to do now is you don't want to be a team that's one and done. Let's face it. You look back in recent history, the Chicago Blackhawks, the Pittsburgh Penguins, the Red Wings, go back to the era of the Islanders and the Oilers. You want to try to build something that is sustainable, and it is so hard to do it. Like you guys were saying, with salary caps, with free agency, and with contracts, and rewarding guys for past performance, which we have been doing in professional sports for a long time. All that being said, it is difficult. It is a challenge to be a general manager sitting right now in Edmonton, and you got a new guy there, like you mentioned, Scott Bowman in for Holland. Boy, those two names sound familiar. And then of course in Tampa, that was a Freudian slip, huh? Tampa, they're trying to win it too, but Florida, So what you want to do is you want some sort of sustainability. I don't even use the term dynasty anymore because that's so far from the NHL right now. But like I said, you group those teams in there that have won it more than once, and you see the pattern of trying to get signed and back as many as they can, as many players, as many as their front players, both offensive, defense, and of course goaltenders. And it's difficult to do. These general managers have a tough
Well,
road ahead of them.
you're saying they want to build a sustainability. Dynasty works well too. You're saying be good every year or be a contender every year when
Yes,
all the rules are stacked against you being able to do it because
right.
the rest of the league doesn't want you doing it, which I
Absolutely.
don't really understand because the 70s Montreal Canadiens, the 80s Oilers, the 90s Red Wings, let's say, are vaunted teams.
Yeah.
And for the Tampa Bay Lightning went to the Stanley Cup 3 straight years, as we know, won twice. The Panthers are trying to be that this year, again, with all the odds and rules stacked against Bill Zito. They're favorites going into the year to win the Atlantic Division. I don't think there's any reason why they wouldn't go to a third straight Stanley Cup final. But they've also lost. We talked about it on this show. I guess I should put it in my column this week, Scott. 8 players from last year's team. That's almost half the
Wow.
team.
Right. That's a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah.
Definitely. And like you said, that sustainability, and you're right. I mean, Panthers, give them credit. 2 straight cups, and yeah, you're shooting for a third.
Well, yeah, if they win 2 straight cups, I can only imagine to me exactly what this fan base will be like. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. But I'll tell you what, since you mentioned Sidney Crosby, let's go over that deal. And we'll also include Lucas Raymond into this discussion as well. Lucas Raymond and the Red Wings have agreed to an 8-year contract extension. This one's 8 years, $64.6 million, which means that Steve Yzerman is committed to keeping his players. And that's what he's always says, I'm going to keep my guys. Now, back on to Sidney Crosby. As you mentioned, 2 years, 8.7 million per year. And I guess that 8.7 million, what does that match now? His uniform number?
Yeah,
Oh,
and I
yeah.
also saw a quote from him today. You could look it up. Candy probably will. She's great at that. I think he said his birthday is 8/7, which would make it August 7th. I believe I saw that quote today. So if somebody wants to line up and give me 12.16 million because it's my birthday, I'd be happy with that. Um, Having fun with the deal in Pittsburgh with Sidney Crosby. I'm gonna look it up myself.
Well, that makes me wonder what my deal would be worth. 12.29. So 12 years, $29 million. Is that what it is? Yeah, well, wrong sport, but hey, if hockey gets to the point where you can give out 29,
Yeah,
$30 million
he was
a
born
year,
August. Guys, he was
more
born
powerful.
August 7th, 1987.
Really?
Eighth month,
Wow.
Wow.
seventh year in '87. He wears
Surreal.
87,
Wow.
and he makes 8.7 million a year.
No wonder
So
he likes that number 87.
exactly, I'd
Well,
like it too.
my lucky number is 33. So if you want to give me a deal of 33 million, I'm not going to whine about it either.
I
So
got, I mean, he deserves that money, no question about it. I mean, you either love this guy or you hate him. I've got a friend here in Detroit, and of course, you've heard this before, Cindy, Crybaby. I mean, all these names they come up with because the fans in the other cities despise him, they hate him, but the man deserves it. He's had a great career. He's had a wonderful time in Pittsburgh, leading them, captain of that team. He deserves it. But back to what you said, Scott, about Lucas Raymond. Yeah, they waited a long time to get this done. They got Moritz Snyder next. He's got to get Snyder signed as well. So, but Lucas Raymond, 8 years, what, around 64 million, Scott?
yeah, so 64.6 to be exact. But
Yeah,
yeah, you're right
yeah.
there.
Yeah, and he's one of the leaders on that team along with Dylan Larkin and Snyder. And so Eisenman knows and the Illich family knows they had to open up the pocketbooks. They had to get this guy signed, and he's got a lot of potential for leading that club. But again, their supporting cast is what's going to be very important too in Detroit. But yeah, these two guys are obviously at different sides of the spectrum. Lucas Raymond is still just a kid, and Sidney is looking to put a big exclamation point on his career. But the 8.7, yeah, he deserves it. And you're right, Rod, what you said a few minutes ago. If he was on the free agency, the open market, God only knows what the other teams would have given him or offered him.
All right.
Well,
Well,
go ahead, Scott.
no, that's all right. What were you going to say?
Oh, I've told you on the show in the past, I had friends that owned the Arizona Coyotes. And one night we were sitting around shooting that, you know what, just like we are right now. And they said, we're going to sign Sidney Crosby. And I said, oh, is that right, guy? How are you going to do that? We're going to fly him out here. We're going to show him Scottsdale, show him a good time. Why wouldn't you want to sign in Arizona? I'm like, I don't know. Maybe he's with the best team in the NHL at that time. It was about 10 years ago. I'm like, guys, it's not that easy. And Sidney obviously loves Pittsburgh. He's a god there. I find it very admirable when guys like Austin Matthews re-upping with the Leafs. When guys want to stay, that means a lot to me. I'm sure it does to you guys too.
Well, loyalty,
yeah.
no question about it. But that said, we got to be loyal to our station break. So we'll put that in. We'll bring Candy Ebling on for exactly that station break. So just to give everybody an overview, in case you're just joining us, we just talked about Lucas Raymond and Sidney Crosby, and we're talking about betting odds. And Candy will tell you how to re-listen to the show. We'll turn it over to Candy. Go ahead.
South Florida Tribune Publishing Company published a book last November. It is called Lessons from the Microphone, Tuning into the Enduring Wisdom of Visionary Leaders. It is written by Scott, the Motor City Madmouth Morganroth, and the foreword was written by none other than George Eichhorn. Get your copy on Amazon, Kindle, Barnes & Noble, Apple, or Google Books. There is also a link to the book on southfloridatribune.com, where you can find all of these three fine gentlemen write for us. And they have articles. There's a link to the book on the front page. There's also a link to our merchandise store. So if you want a South Florida Tribune hat, sweatshirt, shorts, go out and get yours today. If you like to listen to podcasts, you can get this podcast wherever you get your podcasts: Apple, Google, Spotify, iHeartRadio. Monday nights, we talk on Fire Up Florida hockey. Then following, we will talk about baseball. Tuesday nights, we talk football. Wednesday and Thursday nights on Sports Exchange and Fire Up, respectively. You never know what the topics are going to be, so tune in to find out. Then we also have on Wednesday nights, we have the Motor City Madmouth Show with Scott and George, and you never know what they're going to be talking about, so tune in. That's on nofilter.net. At Tribune South is our Twitter handle. Again, our website is www.southfloridatribune. Back to the program, Scott.
Rod, I got to ask you a question. Really serious question. Do you have ESP?
Maybe.
Okay. Because you know what? Here's a guy, people, folks, fans, that talk about the 1970s Montreal Canadiens, right? But I got two topics of Montreal Canadiens looking back. Seriously. Great stuff, Rod.
Well,
I cannot believe
I have
this
ESPN,
guy.
I can tell you that. And my
Yeah,
wife,
no. Don't mess up the one liner. I ain't talking about them. We're talking about ESP, extrasensory perception.
I got you.
Yeah, so we're going to set it up this way. Looking back on the career of Bernie Geoffrion of the Montreal Canadiens, he played from 1950 to 1968. He scored 393 goals, 429 assists. Points, he had 822. Games played, 883. One Hart Trophy, two Art Ross trophies, one Calder Trophy, 6 Stanley Cups. And mind you, I believe he was the first coach of the Atlanta Flames. What are your thoughts, Rod, about Bernie Boom Boom Geoffrion?
I think it's the greatest nickname in the history of the National Hockey League. That's really all I think. I also think he's credited as being the man who invented the slap shot.
Okay.
Have we heard that, George? Have you heard that before? That's what I heard about Boom Boom.
Yeah.
And they just don't have nicknames like these guys anymore. He was the era of Rocket Richard, Boom Boom Geoffrion. I can't think of too many. The Golden Jet, Bobby Hull. Yeah, exactly. They just do not make, listen, with the Panthers now, it's Eki, and Bob and like, come on, guys, put a little thought into your nicknames. That's what I think of Boom Boom Geoffrion. I think he's the greatest nickname in NHL history and the man credited with inventing the slap shot.
There you go. There, and of course, let's not forget, if my memory serves me correctly, he was the first coach of the Atlanta Flames, and I believe they drafted a guy by the name Phil Muir on that team as one of the first goaltenders. Either it was Phil Muir or I think the other one, as I go back on it, was Daniel Bouchard as well. They both played for the Flames. All right, George. Boom, boom. Icor, no, that's his name. But what are your thoughts about
Oh, well, I'll tell you what, you're dragging a big, important name out of the hockey past. I agree with what you said, Rod. I mean, that's a great nickname. It really is. Playing in the era of Gordie Howe and a little bit with Hull and, guys like Richard, the Richard brothers, and Gump Worsley and Eddie Jacquemin and Terry Sawchuk. I mean, that was a golden era for hockey, no question about it. But Boom Boom, yeah, that is a great nickname. He was highly regarded in the NHL as a player and as a coach. Not as much success as he probably wanted, but just a great, great guy. And I'm sure that those old Red Wings could spin some yarn about some of the games they played against Boom Boom. He wasn't afraid to throw the weight around, just like our friend Gordie Howe wasn't afraid to throw the elbow around.
Yeah, well, George, let me interrupt you for a moment. We'll focus on Gordie Howe next week. Today, I'll drop the boom boom on you if you don't stay with Geoffrion.
All right. Boom Boom Geoffrion. Yeah, I love the name, and he was a great player. Unfortunately, I was a little bit too young at the time, so I did not get a chance to see him. So, but I've heard some good stories about the guy. Yeah.
All right, well, we have Walter Mitchell. It's hockey day. My Red Wings up. Lucas Raymond 8.8075 got one done. The contract I saw could be different than what you have, but yeah, they did. The Wings did re-up Lucas Raymond. They're building around their finance about their core, and that's one way to do it. So, all right, well, we'll stay to the Canadians theme, okay? And we're going to look back on the career of Jean Beliveau. Montreal Canadiens goals 507, assists 712, points 1219, games played 1123, 2 Hart trophies, 1 Art Ross, 1 Conn Smythe, and get this, 10 Stanley Cups for Mr. Beliveau. He's nodding his head. I'd nod my head if I were you, Rod, George, because Jean Beliveau was one heck of a player. And obviously we know that both of these guys are in the Hockey Hall of Fame.
Yeah,
Rod?
well, yeah, go ahead. Well, Beliveau matches, I believe, Henri Richard, the Pocket Rocket, each with 10 Stanley Cups. It was before my time to watch, but what I know about Beliveau is I think he was 6'4", which was a giant in that era of hockey. And he's got relatives in my home province of Saskatchewan who speak lovingly, with great respect. And Jean Beliveau, I mean, the Montreal Canadiens, whether you like them or not, if you ever walk into their arena, the old Forum or the Bell Center now, the hair stands up on the back of your neck. You look up and see the names in the rafters of Beliveau, obviously Richard, who we talked about. It's they're what makes the Montreal Canadiens what they are. Class. Beliveau leads the parade.
Yeah, I haven't seen a game in Montreal. I've always had a burning desire.
You
As I
should go.
understand, oh yeah, I would like to, and I would cover the Red Wings at that point. But I wish I could have gone to the Forum. I know they have a new place. Plus, I have a very good friend that lives up there, so I look forward to taking Candy over to see a game in Montreal for sure. But as I understand, I think the old Forum is still there. It's just something else right
It's a
now.
movie
That they
theater.
Is that? Oh, good. I'll watch a movie. I can't remember the last time I was in a movie theater, but I would watch one, okay, in that place just to say I went there, then we'll catch a hockey game. All right, George, you're not too old to talk about Beliveau, are you? So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, a great guy. The Hockey News has him as the 7th greatest NHL player of all time. What a career he had. I mean, outstanding. He's still going strong at 83 years old. He's got over 500 goals in his career, 700 assists plus that, over 1,200 points. Classy guy. I mean, he was classy and he was a bit of an activist too. Some people may not remember Ted Lindsay gets a lot of credit for, starting up the Hockey Players Association and the union. But John Beliveau was pretty active too, and voicing his opinion on, the rights and the privileges of hockey players as far as being unionized. But boy, when I think of the Montreal Canadiens, Jean Beliveau obviously is one of the top guys you think of. Richard, of course, and Worsley, but boy, oh boy, Beliveau, just a class guy. Also, I understood that the late Prime Minister Mulroney twice tried to get him to enter politics, but he said no. A little bit of trivia. He said he didn't want any part of that, even though he was considered an activist. But
Yeah.
yeah, great guy. Certainly wore the Montreal uniform with great pride. Always a class guy.
That's a no-win to go down that road. I've been offered a couple of times to get into politics too. No thanks. But did I ever open a can of worms, guys, on my daytime talk show last week? I said, if our Mount Rushmore of the NHL, I think you guys would agree, if the first three names are Howe or Gretzky, who's the fourth? And people just went crazy about it. They're like, mostly French Canadian hockey players, since we're talking about them. Mario Lemieux came to mind. People are like, why are you even talking about this? It's Mario Lemieux. And I'm like, well, just wait. Sidney Crosby's got 3 Stanley Cups. Mario's got 2. Alex Ovechkin, they're saying, if not for COVID, he would have caught Wayne Gretzky for the goal record by now. Plus, he's won a Stanley Cup. This is the question. You could go on for days. Who's the fourth? If you agree with the first 3. Some people weren't even sold with the first 3.
Well, you know what? Here's where that Mount Rushmore gets interesting. It depends on the area for which you're brought up in, too. So, in other words, you'll be more partial towards the Believeaus. You'll be more partial toward the Rocket, Richard. And don't forget Bobby Hall either. Okay, Bobby Hall would certainly be a guy that I could mention was worthy of consideration. So, or if you want to go with today, I mean, in today's modern era, if I had to choose one, I'd go Mario Lemieux. And I'll tell you why. He didn't only compile up numbers, he saved a franchise. And that's why when you put the sum of the whole and the whole of the sum, to me, that would be my way of saying Mario Lemieux would occupy the fourth. That's if you're basing everything off of both, and he would get it. But we just mentioned in the last few days, one of the things I'm doing, folks, if you notice, is I'm going back in time with the hockey show to bring up the old and incorporate the new with what we're doing with the Panthers and the Bolts, because I want to bring all hockey fans together. That's what I want to do, old and new. And that's what makes this show fun to put together because, let's face it, there's a lot of diehard hockey fans, whether you're in South Florida or not, you came from somewhere, right? I mean, if you're going to sit there and talk about Rangers or Oilers, you can make a case for Mark Messier as well. And
somebody said that. Yeah, Messier. Absolutely.
Here's the reason why.
Don't forget you got goaltending too.
Oh, yeah.
Terry Slachek, Patrick Waugh. I mean, you got some great goalies of all time too.
Well, think of that. If you're going to, even though his career was a little short because he did become a lawyer, Ken Dryden's a guy I wouldn't rule out of it either.
Yep. Kenny Dryden. Yeah, he was a good one.
He was just smarter than all of us. All he did was call the Miracle on Ice. That's all.
Yeah.
I'm a goalie guy, and I don't even have a goalie up there. I'll leave it at this. Gordon Howe retired as the points leader, the games played leader, the everything leader. Bobby Orr's the greatest defenseman ever. And Wayne retired as the greatest with 56 records. So I don't think it's a debate. The fourth is. But here's another one for you, Scott. I had this brought up to me last year here by Panthers fans on my podcast I do with Serena, the Cats and Bolts podcast. We're talking history, this type of thing. And somebody said to me, we don't care what happened before 1970 in the NHL. And I thought, well, then you're watching the wrong show because we do.
Yeah. And that's a problem that does come up with the younger generation. Yeah, they can't relate to the older stars.
Well, listen, we could do a show on that topic, and I can carry that over to different particular sports, and I can tell you how many of these younger guys don't know who the older guys were that made this sport possible for them to play in, but that'd be another story for another day. So but I'm glad. I mean, you know what? maybe one of these days, Rod, we'll go out there and come up with our own Mount Rushmore. I think it's good. Right now, we're trying to do it on the fly without deep thought,
Yeah.
but it's so good because of the fact that I do mention Geoffrion and Beliveau, who were just phenomenal players in their day. And they played for Scotty Bowman. No, George, don't talk about Scotty Bowman because you go and fill the rest of the show. We'll have nothing to talk about. Just kidding. I love George's elaborate answers. They're really, really good. I've known this guy forever, so it's easy for him and I to go back and forth on this kind of
First
stuff.
guy you met in the business.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Well, sort of, yeah.
Yeah, and in case a lot of you people should know, right now, the Motor City Mad Mouse show on Wednesdays on No Filter, George and I are the hosts for that show, so we hope you can join us for the early show as it leads up to our show, The Sports Exchange. So, with that said, Rod, you're going to give us an update. George, have you any other closing thoughts on what we just talked about? Beliveau, are you pretty cool with what we've done?
No, I'm very cool with him. I mean, great guy, and I know that well, you guys had a great announcer too, named Danny Gallivan too in Montreal. But
Right.
no, I've heard all the great things are true about Beliveau. Great guy, and a great citizen, Canadian citizen as well.
Now, well, I'm going to turn over to Rod right now. He's going to give us some Tampa Bay Lightning updates. What's the latest going on in the Tampa Bay area, by which I will be going up there this week to cover the Miami Hurricanes and the USF Bulls. Oh, my goodness. This one's tugging at the heart. This one's tugging at the heart. My alma mater against a team I have a major vested interest in. But you know what? I guarantee I'll never lose no matter what happens that day.
I was going to say, a very smart guy told me that you won't lose either way.
See, there you go.
In that game. So I just wonder how much is Miami going to win by?
Well, I hate to say this, but I'll say it at some point during the week. I have a feeling that the Canes will win by at least 14.
Yeah. Oh, I was
That's
going to
my
say
gut
more
feel.
than that. I was going to say 20 or more.
All right, well, that's okay.
Here's your update. The Tampa Bay Lightning and Florida Panthers just wrapped up their rookie tournament in Nashville. It's called the NHL Southeastern Rookie Showcase. And they met today. The two teams met today. They played a 10 a.m. Central game. The Panthers and Lightning rookies. Lightning won it 5-2. There was 4 teams in the tournament: Nashville, Carolina, Florida, and Tampa Bay. They're all dispersing now back to their cities, and the official NHL training camps will be opening, I believe it's Thursday. So that's
Very
where
good.
the rookie tournament's wrapped up this weekend.
Very good. Well, so as we keep you going through not only what we're going to do during the season about current events, I'm still going to dive back in to a lot of the history that comes my way. And we're also going to incorporate another segment as time goes on about lists in the NHL. And that'll be a very intriguing topic that we go along with as well, in addition. So I have a lot of things planned for the show. And as we appreciate the amount of people watching today all over our platforms, as well as Rod's, but there's a lot more in store. We're just glad that everybody can be a part of it, and we'll give you as much information as we can. So do you have any parting shots, Rod?
No. I think the biggest news of the day is Sidney Crosby signing, but I wasn't surprised. He hinted that was coming. I'm ready for hockey. I know that there was not a lot of interest in this rookie tournament this weekend, so I get it. It's very important to the teams, not as important to the fans. And I like the preseason games. I'm going to be going to all the Panthers games. Lightning and Panthers play 3 times in the preseason with the big clubs. So just happy to be on chatting with you guys. Always good to see you. George, you have a great week. Keep up the great work. And I need one of those hats, so don't forget.
We'll take care of it. Don't worry. I mean, you and I are going to be getting together sometimes during the day. One day during the week, we'll just have to sort it out. Rod and I are going to continue making plans to make this show as big as we can. And George Eichhorn obviously has done an unbelievable job.
Promise.
And every so often I'll bring on another individual as well. So I have a lot of things that I'm working on right now. But the core of Fire Up Florida hockey is George Eichhorn and Rod Peterson. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. These guys are absolutely outstanding, is what they are. So, with that said, all I can tell you is
just one more thing on my end is, and you hit on it very briefly there, Rod. These developmental camps that these teams have are very expensive. I have an unnamed source who told me that the Red Wings are very concerned about the cost of this whole thing going up to Traverse City, and they only got one team, Dallas Stars. Jim Nill and the Stars are the only team that came this year. Usually the Red Wings were able to get like 3 or 4 other teams, but maybe we'll keep this for a topic, for a future show.
Sure.
This business about the developmental camp and how costly they are, because they're flying kids in from all over the world that they've drafted. So I mean, it's a big expense. I don't know if it's worth it. I like it. The Red Wings do theirs up in Traverse City, of course, where fans don't normally see hockey. The Red Wings hockey.
I don't know how you guys have been around this business a long time. The hockey people are going to want to do it. The business people are not, because it doesn't make any money and it just costs them money. So that's
point.
the constant rub of sports. So, okay, thanks, guys.
Well, all right. Well, anyways, Rod, before you take off, one thing I want you to do is before you exit the program is let everybody know how they can get a hold of you as well and where they can see your show, and then you can take off.
Well, right there on the screen where it says Rod Peterson, just put an @ in front of that. It's @ Rod Peterson, Twitter, Instagram. And from there, you can see my various shows. I have a daily talk show from noon to 2 Eastern on Game Plus TV, the Rod Peterson Show, and the Cats and Bolts podcast that I do with Serena, focused specifically on Panthers and Lightning. So, won the award for the fastest growing podcast last year. I don't know if I told you that.
Well, you haven't, but I got news for you. At the rate you're going, there'll be plenty more things that you're going to accomplish. And we're just glad that you're a part of the hockey show that we're putting together. Here. Well, we're glad to have you on. Well, Josh Adore a little late for this party, but this show's ending a little bit because we covered all the ground, and we do have baseball coming up shortly. So there's your favorite friend there, Josh Adore. Show's ending early? No, they do start at 7:30, Joshua, just so you know. And that's Eastern time.
Show up early, Joshua. Fix your watch.
There you go. Work on that watch. Okay, but no more Tarasenko comments. We burned that bad boy out. Well, with that said, all right, Rod, we appreciate you being on the show. George, why don't you let everybody know how they get a hold of it? And Candy will have one more station break. Rod will be in touch for sure. And, of course, now he says, I'll watch return. I'm out being a janitor. If that's okay, Rod. Joshua, more power to you. You got to do what you got to do to support the family. More power to you. So, but that said, Rod, we appreciate you doing this, and we'll see you next Monday night.
Thank you, Rod.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Good night, Rod.
Good night. You can get a hold of me at Yahoo at gicorn at yahoo.com, on X or Twitter at SandGSports99. Follow me on the South Florida Tribune channel. I write under the Motor City Tribune, where you'll see my column. And at the end of my column, there's always a link to look at my book, which is for sale on Amazon. It's been out for several years, but it covers the history of Detroit and Michigan sports broadcasters. And myself and Scott are in the book, along with so many other greats, our dear friend Ernie Harwell, and great guys like Bob Ufer and Beckman and Blaha and Ray Lane and Dave Dials. The list goes on and on. So here we go. We got several ways you can get a hold of me or follow me on the shows. Glad to be part of Fire Up. I'm glad to be part of 108 Stitches and also the Sports Exchange. And so it's a great network to be part of, and I'm proud of being part of it. And Candy and Scott, you do a great job. Always.
Thank you, George. One more final station break, and then we'll call it a night. Just so you know, 108 Stitches Baseball Talk will follow us at approximately the top of the hour. So go ahead, Candy, take us to the finish line.
The South Florida Tribune Publishing Company published a book last November. It is called Lessons from the Microphone, Tuning into the Enduring Wisdom of Visionary Leaders. It is written by your host, Scott, the Motor City Madmouth Morganroth, and the foreword is written by none other than George Eichhorn. Get your copy today. Barnes & Noble, Google, Apple, Kindle, and Amazon. There is also a link on our website, www.southfloridatribune.com, where you can look at the great writings of Scott and George and Rod. They all write for us. I take pictures. I'm better off behind the camera. So, but go see the pictures I take, the writings of the three gentlemen. There's also a link to Scott's book right on the front page. There is also a link to our sports merchandise store that has South Florida Tribune stuff on it, logo on it. So if you need a new sweatshirt or a t-shirt or want a hat, go get one. There's also some of the Motor City Madmouth logo on them. So if you're listening to us up in Detroit and you want to get a Motor City Madmouth hat, go for it. We also broadcast these wherever you get your podcast. So if you listen to iHeartRadio, Google, Apple Podcast, Castbox, Deezer, wherever your podcast, you can get our show. Tonight, Fire Up Florida, we talk hockey. After this, we talk 108 Stitches baseball talk. Tomorrow night is Inside the Pigskin football. And then Wednesday night is Sports Exchange, and Fire Up is on Thursday. Those two programs, pretty much anything goes. You never know what topics we're going to be talking about, so make sure you watch. Scott also on Wednesday nights has a show called the Motor City Mad Mouse Show, and him and George talk sports primarily, but you just never know. That is on nofilter.net. Again, nofilter.net. If you see that red subscribe button, that means you haven't subscribed to our channel. Honestly, I don't know why you haven't so far, but please do so. Share us with all your friends and family. Anybody that would love any of our programming. We also cover the Miami Hurricanes, so if you like them, you'll be able to go see the press conferences after the games. Scott gets questions in. Go check out the videos that are up on our YouTube channel. If you are a Twitter fan or X, at Tribune South. If you want to email us any topic ideas, southfloridatribune@gmail.com. If you want to sponsor a show or advertise a show, you're going to call Scott, 954-304-4941. Again, publish a book, Lessons from the Microphone, Tuning in the Enduring Wisdom of Visionary Leaders, available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Kindle. And George wrote a book that's also available on Amazon. There's a picture up in my upper right corner right now of George's book as well. Support everybody that supports us and go and get the book. Both books. They're both very good. Okay, Scott, back to you.
All right, Candy. Thank you very much. Great job by Rod, George, as usual. And I should point out, when you do subscribe to our channel, then you'll definitely go out there and get all the alerts necessary that you can get about what we have coming on here. We try to go out there and have a lot of different types of shows, so to each his own, so to speak. So we'll have a lot more great ideas in the pipeline as well. So, but meanwhile, we do appreciate late B. Lowe's 22 meeting a ribeye steak. Well, if you're interested in the food idea, I had manwich tonight with the crushed hamburger. That was fantastic. And I don't talk about eating, but that was pretty good. So with that said, we're trying to phase out fast food except for Subway. But meanwhile, we have 108 Stitches baseball talk shortly. So we look forward to seeing you back then. So on behalf of Rod Peterson, Candy Ebling, George Eichhorn, and myself, Scott Morgan, the Motor City Mad Mouth, I want to thank you for joining us on this edition of Fire Up Florida. And we will see you next Monday night, same time, same place. Good night, everybody.